You hit it on the head. What a mess. Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show, we'll be talking, Canada. U.S. men bounce back, U.S. women roll on, opening ceremonies, Leagues Cup guilt, swearing on the field, Griezmann, McKennie, gender parity, and so much more. But first joining us, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Monday, July 29th in the year 2024?
I'm doing well. For those of you watching us, I'm wearing a Paris hat in honor of the Summer Olympics, which are off and running. We'll talk about that in a second, but you're wearing an interesting outfit yourself.
I was sent this by the United States Soccer Federation. It is a jersey, the likes of which we see the men and women sporting over there. It's nice and clean in that... I want more big, bold, gaudy on the field, but off the field, if I'm just kind of tooling around, not that I would necessarily wear a jersey with, and I'll turn around real quick, Lalas 22 on the back, but if I'm going to wear something, I like it kind of nice and sleek and clean and classic, and that's kind of what this is. But it's not memorable. It's not historic in any way. However, it is free. And I appreciate the folks over there at the United States Soccer Federation for sending this out. And I do have Olympic fever, Mosse. I am into it in terms of what is going on. We're coming to you, as we said, on Monday. Today, evidently, Mosse, the breakdancing Olympics start. I know you're looking forward to that, right?
Absolutely. Now, on Friday, we had the opening ceremony, which I know you watched and have thoughts about.
Oh, the opening ceremony, yeah. This is a tradition that is part of the Olympics, and it has grown and gotten bigger and bigger. I think I told the story a while ago about, one of the, most interesting and, greatest moments from an Olympic perspective, and I look in my past, is walking in the opening ceremonies in 1992 in Barcelona. And, the world has changed. Olympic productions have gotten bigger and bolder and more lavish as time has gone on. And this one was interesting to say the least. It has gotten a lot of attention. Some would say in negative types of attention in the way that it has been perceived by so many out there. It was very long, first and foremost. And so if you watched it all, congratulations. But there was something for everyone, Mosse, in that there was something, I think, for everybody to love, and there was certainly something for everyone to hate. I will say this, when it comes to, the big controversy about the production, and in particular the quote-unquote Last Supper portion or the Dionysus feast, depending on how you want to look at it, the opening ceremonies, I look at it now as kind of a work of art, in that I think that in this particular opening ceremonies, the French got exactly what they intended, in that at times it was going to shock you and amaze you and provoke you and endear. At times it was going to disturb you and confuse you and offend you and tease you and titillate. And in that, they completely succeeded. And in that, I guess in the truest sense of what a work of art is, not everybody likes it. And as a matter of fact, in the truest sense of what artists are, sometimes they specifically go out to irritate and to piss people off. And in that, they did it. But I will say this, when they now have tried to clean it up and come back and kind of apologize and say, clearly it was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. Come on, stop, okay? You knew exactly what you were doing. So own it, as any good artist would do. And don't try to gaslight or be obtuse or disingenuous in the way that you talk about it right now.
Years ago, my parents went to Milan and they wanted to check out the Last Supper, which is in a church in Milan, the Santa Maria delle Grazie. And they showed up thinking they could walk right in, and the bemused people there said, "No, you have to make an appointment." And my dad said, "Okay, well, how does 4 o'clock tomorrow sound?" And they said, "No, sir. The next available is November of 2037. It's like Packer season tickets. It's something that you have to plan generations in advance."
Well, I mean, look, those that are irritated and offended, okay, if that's the way you want to spend your time and your bandwidth for outrage, you want to use it on that, that's fine. I do hope that it doesn't curtail and turn people off in terms of watching the Olympics, because I mean, this is America, and when people with an American flag are on the fields, or I guess the breakdance field or anything like that, I'm going to watch it. I'm excited about it.
I watched a lot this weekend. I watched the great France-Denmark handball match. I watched Italy-US water polo. So you get into these sports that you would normally not follow. Remember I mentioned once on the pod that I find it interesting that Grover Cleveland's presidency is counted twice when we say how many U.S. presidents there have been. There are 3 Summer Olympics that didn't happen because of world wars: 1916 Berlin, 1940 Tokyo, and 1944 London. And they count those. So this is considered the 33rd Summer Olympics, but there have only actually been 30, and they count the 3 that never occurred because of world wars.
Even though they didn't actually happen,
Yeah.
even though they skipped that thing, they just say, well, it would have happened, and so we're just counting it as that.
Yeah, interesting, huh?
That's insane. Okay. Anything else, my friend? Did you watch anything besides the Olympics? Because
Very quickly,
I did
commit a major faux pas last night. I
Uh-oh.
want to apologize on the air. I watched the penultimate episode of season 2 of House of the Dragon. There was a pretty shocking scene. I texted Sean Sullivan about it, and he hadn't watched the episode yet, so I might have spoiled it a little bit for him.
Wow. I took a real quick trip to Tahoe with the family, and we had a bunch of podcasts going on, and there were kind of American historical podcasts, including a thing on the Donner Pass, the Donner family, and that craziness. Let's see, Mulholland and that whole getting water down and all that kind of stuff that happened. So those were kind of cool. And then my daughter, she wanted to do a true crime one, and she put it on. And we get through 6 episodes, and only then does she realize that it did not fulfill my criteria of watching something that's episodal in that it starts to finish. So it was not a good last hour of the trip when I found out that after the 6th episode, there is still another one to come. So
Wow.
tisk, tisk, tisk. All right, anyway, should we light this candle, my friend?
Let's do it.
Where shall we start? As if there was any place else to start when it
Well,
comes to the Olympics and soccer.
Are you familiar with the expression, if it bleeds, it leads?
You know it, baby.
This was a triumphant weekend for U.S. soccer, but Sean Sullivan would like us to begin with the Canada spying story, which has turned into Watergate. Last Wednesday, are you okay with that decision first off?
Yes, because it transcends all sports. It transcends the news. It has become now a part of the Olympic story, so much so that they mention it in pretty much every different sport.
So last Wednesday, we told you that the Canada women had been caught spying on New Zealand's training sessions with drones ahead of their Olympics opener. 2 assistants were sent home, and their head coach, Bev Preistman, wasn't going to manage that first game. But FIFA launched their own investigation and came down with even harsher punishments. Preistman and the 2 assistants have been banned for a year, while Canada was docked 6 points at these Olympics. We'll tell you what they've done on the field in a minute, but they are appealing that 6-point ban to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. There are all sorts of reports coming out that this has been going on for years on both the men's and women's side. TSN has been all over this story. And the Canadian government is now threatening to withhold funding from the federation until they get to the bottom of all this. What a mess, huh?
You hit it on the head. What a mess. And certainly, at the risk of stating the obvious, not something that Canadian soccer, less than 2 years away from the World Cup, wanted to have happen, or just in the moment right now with the Canadian soccer team and the men's and women, or the women's team defending their gold medal and all that kind of stuff. It's just a bad look for Canadian soccer in terms of the federation, Canadian soccer as a bigger type of entity with what's going on, and Canada. And it's a poor reflection on Canada. A couple of things here. I think you mentioned as we come on air, the Canadian Soccer Federation is appealing their 6-point deduction, but they are not appealing the fine and the the punishment for the coaches. So evidently they've said we can't even provide a good argument for that. So we're just going to accept that and move on. It was interesting to hear, and my heart goes out to this Canadian team in terms of the players. All right. But they're big girls, and they understand the reality of the situation and how they are being painted. And while it might hurt and they may look at it as being unfair, I do think that they are at times missing the point. Nobody is calling the players themselves cheaters. All right. I actually believe that most have not necessarily known about this, and yet they are being punished. But that's the point. Right? The point is that everything that you have done up until then is now potentially tainted. And as you said, Mosse, when it comes to the men's and women's side, because it looks like that this was a systemic type of thing, that this was baked into what Canada did in terms of the drones. Now, they either saw it as, we don't think that it's illegal, or they saw it was illegal and we don't care, or it was just kind of clandestine and underneath. Jesse Marsh now has been involved in this as the new coach of Canada, and evidently he was told about it after the Copa America, which they did so well. So now that calls into question what was used, what wasn't used. And the problem for the players is that now you have to look back and you say, well, was I given information that was ill-gotten gains? And then I went on the field and used that information and had an advantage, and maybe even a slight advantage. And we know at the highest level, sometimes it is this much of an advantage you can get. But it is just, if I was a player, I would be so angry at the leadership. All of the leadership when it comes to the Canadian Soccer Federation, when it comes to all of the coaches that they have had, I would be so angry because you have put these players in a position where they have to defend something and defend themselves at the accusation. And while they might not have had anything to do with it, again, it is a reflection on them. So welcome to the world. It's just bad all around. I will also say this, Mosse. If you are the United States Soccer Federation, when it comes to JT Badson and Cindy Parlow-Cone and now Emma Hayes and whoever comes in as the new men's coach, you better, you know what, better not stink, all right? You better be looking and you better understand exactly what has happened before. Because if there is something in the past where the United States Soccer Federation has been involved in this, either deal with it now or make sure you scrub the hell out of it so it doesn't come up, because people will be looking and you better be damn clean.
Sam Borden wrote an interesting piece. Evidently, the U.S. suspected that this was going on with Canada, but they didn't report it because they didn't want to damage the Canadian Federation, given that they're working together on the 2026 World Cup. Do you have an issue with that?
I mean, look, you have partners and I guess business partners and, friendships and relationships. Either they're personal or they're, bigger in terms of entities, in the United States Soccer Federation and the Canadian Federation and the Mexican Federation for that matter. They have a vested interest in things going well and not having these types of things come out leading up to this incredible summer in 2026. So I don't have a problem with them saying, hey, is there a way for us to work together to get through this? And we don't want to necessarily call you out on something like this if it's going to ultimately damage something bigger.
Based on the reporting I've read, I actually think Jesse Marsh comes out looking okay. He didn't knowingly use this information, and he seemed taken aback when he was told about it. The guy that comes off the worst is John Herdman, because he was the women's coach for 7 years and then the men's coach for 5 years, and Bev Preistman was an assistant under him with the women, so his fingerprints are all over this.
And they won a gold medal, right? And he took them back to the World Cup after 30-some years, right? So these historic feats that were being that they have been celebrated, and I think rightly so, now they look a little bit different. I do think, Jesse Marsh probably was taken aback and surprised that this was even something that they were doing. The problem now is, was there information continuing to come because the system had already been built that Jesse and the team used through Copa America that, again, was ill-gotten because of this systemic drone program that they evidently have had?
Now, interestingly enough, Canada have won their first 2 games at these Olympics. They beat New Zealand 2-1, and then they earned a dramatic 2-1 victory over host France. Vanessa Gilles with the winner in the 12th minute of stoppage time. Their last group game is against Colombia. If they win that, they will be off to the quarterfinals. Vanessa Gilles, the hero of the win over France, here's what she said afterwards. What's giving us energy is each other, is our determination, is our pride to prove people wrong, our pride to represent this country when all this stuff is coming out about our values, about our representation as Canadians. We're not cheaters. We're damn good players. We're a damn good team. We're a damn good group, and we've proved that today.
Well, maybe today you're not cheaters, okay? And when I say you, I'm not talking about the players individually. I'm talking about the team. And from what we have seen so far, and who knows, maybe they could come up with some information and some proof that is completely unfounded. I think that would have come out right by now. So again, it's not that you individually are cheaters, all right? It's that this has been done, and it's a reflection on you. And I get it. I mean, you work so hard to get to this point, to be an Olympian, to represent your country, and in the case of Canada, to the women's team, to have a real chance at winning a medal, another medal. And now this comes out, and I get it. You would feel aggrieved. And I've never been in that position, but I can at least put myself in her shoes and understand why she would come out and defend herself and her teammates from what she perceives as attacks on them. But I don't think it's going to change anything. However, I love the fact that they were able to not only, with that 6-point deduction, go out there and play, but get a really, really important win. And if they were somehow able to come back from that 6-point deduction and still go on despite all of this, I mean, it's like, here's the other part, is that not only was it cheating, but it was stupid cheating. And again, it's Dumbo with the feather. Canada, you didn't need that. You just showed that you didn't need that, because the cleanest game that you have played, you went out and beat France. So congratulations. Keep going. You don't need the feather. You can fly, Dumbo. You can fly, Canada. You don't need drones. So anyway, it's all just really ugly and unfortunate. And I hope that it gets sorted out, and I hope people take their medicine and that we go on and get a much better representation on and off the field for this team going forward, because it's so important over the next couple of years.
Has Victor Montagliani chimed in at all? I haven't seen that.
No, I mean, I'm sure he's just pulling his hair out right now, saying this is the last thing that, Canada needed, that this World Cup in 2026 needed, or that CONCACAF, for that matter, which he represents, needed. So to the extent that you can deal with it, again, take your medicine and move on as quickly as possible. That's what needs to happen.
Meanwhile, the U.S. women are absolutely flying, 2 wins out of 2. First up, they beat Zambia 3-0. Mal Swanson with 2 goals. Trinity Rodman got the other. And then they followed that up by hammering Germany 4-1. Sophia Smith with 2 goals. Swanson and Lynn Williams got the others. The U.S. already off to the quarterfinals. This Emma Hayes looking like the real deal, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they're flying. They're scoring goals. They've already scored more goals than the previous entire World Cup. This trio up top of Rodman and Smith and Swanson is something special in that individually they are dangerous and they can do things, and then collectively there is a coordination and understanding. Oh, and then by the way, you can throw in a Lynn Williams off the bench and she comes in and scores. So this is almost, well, in many instances, in many ways, the team that people wanted Vlatko to have in the summer of 2023 at the World Cup. This is it. And it's one thing to say, well, this is the natural progression, and this is, where it was heading anyway. But no, there were plenty of people that said at the time, no, whether it's an Alex Morgan or a Megan Rapinoe and stuff like that, this is not the right mix on and off the field, and this should have been done a year ago. And so I think that the second guessing again of the way Vlatko handled the situation, I think is fair and is right to have. But in terms of looking forward and moving on, this is nice to see. So I don't think, while Emma Hayes is going to get the credit, and she should because it's on her watch, I don't think it took a genius to figure out that this is what needed to be done, maybe earlier, but certainly from Emma, she couldn't have done it earlier. So she comes in, does it, and now it's paying dividends. However, I will say this, Emma Hayes has not done anything that hasn't been done many, many times in the past here. So there is still judgment to have going forward.
I don't want to be cruel to the guy, but is it possible that the rest of the world hasn't caught up that much? Vlad Kondonovsky just did a really bad job, and when the U.S. women are functioning properly, they're still able to comfortably beat 99% of the teams in the world?
Yes. I mean, no matter what, and I know it's a little flip and a little disrespectful to say you just throw out the ball, but in many instances, and we're going to talk a little bit more about why the U.S. women's national team and why women's soccer in the United States has been so successful and will continue to be successful going forward.
I agree with you. That front three of Rodman, Swanson, and Smith is terrific. You've also got Jaden Shaw and Macario, who was an emerging top 5 player in the world before her injury problem started. If she can ever get completely healthy again, that attack by the next World Cup could be absolutely bonkers. The U.S. will... I'm sorry, you have something on that?
No.
The U.S. will close out the group stage against Australia, who earned an incredible win. They trailed Zambia 5-2, came back to win 6-5. Barbara Banda got a hat trick for Zambia, her 3rd Olympics hat trick. I expect the U.S. to win Group B, which means they would face the runner-up in Group C in the quarterfinals. I am 90% sure that's going to be Japan.
Okay. Did you watch the 6-5 game? Which it was insane.
It's highlights.
Just insane. I will say that goalkeeping so far on the women's side of the Olympic soccer tournament has not covered itself with glory. It has not been good at all. However, I like goals. I like a lot of goals. I have no problem with a lot of goals. Goalkeeping and defending, again, was not on display here. And for Australia to go down and for Barbara Banda to be just, at will scoring goals, even when she wasn't even trying to score goals, or bouncing off her and going into the goal, and then to come back, it was a nutty game with some really, really bad defending and goalkeeping ultimately.
Spain with 2 wins out of 2. We could be headed for a collision course here, U.S.-Spain final. That would be mouthwatering. Yeah?
Yeah, Spain did what Spain does on the women's side and the men's side for that matter in terms of the results. They do it in different ways, but they looked like they are just kind of kicking on from their World Cup triumph a year ago.
The U.S. men also with a nice win this weekend. They bounced back from their opening defeat to France by hammering New Zealand 4-1. Mihailovic from the penalty spot, Walker Zimmerman, Gianluca Buzio, and Paxton Aronson got the other goals. The U.S. moving up to 2nd in Group A. They will close out the group stage tomorrow against Guinea and Saint-Etienne. The U.S. now in good shape to advance.
Yeah, I mean, it's all to play for, and I like the way that they came out against New Zealand. A couple of the overage players showing why they are there, whether it's Mihailovic, finishing off the penalty, or Walker Zimmerman on a set-piece type of situation. So that's important for those leaders in terms of what they bring with the experience and the age relative to the others that are all under 23. That's important that they are consistently making an impact. But now, as we said before, I mean, it's playing out the way that we thought, right? You take your chances against France, and while they played a good first half, ultimately France was the much better team, and it showed in the ultimate score. So fine, you got to win your next 2 games. Mission accomplished against New Zealand, and it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they have an opportunity against Guinea. And if you told me the U.S. Olympic team gets to play against Guinea for the opportunity to go get out of the group, I'll take that every single day. And I don't think that they should have a problem.
Tanner Tessmann continuing to impress. We're going to talk about his club future in the next segment, but to me, he looks like the best player on this team.
The best player on the team?
Yeah.
You think so? Now, do you differentiate between players that we've kind of already seen at the national team? Because I know Tanner has been there too, but he's still very,
that's
very
fair.
young.
Among the under 23 crop, I would say he's the best player.
So do you? Because I look at it as to, does anybody jump out in terms of making a claim going forward relative to 2026? Has anybody done that besides Tanner Tessmann? And maybe it is Tanner Tessmann as the only one.
No, he's the one for me.
All right.
Lex, do you remember a tournament we covered for Fox called Euro 2024?
Vaguely, yes.
In Group E of said tournament, after 2 match days, all 4 teams were on 3 points, which had never happened in Euro's history. That was Romania, Belgium, Slovakia, and Ukraine. And then the last 2 games ended in draws, so everybody finished with 4 points. Romania, Belgium, and Slovakia advanced. Ukraine became the first team in Euro's history to collect 4 points in the group stage and not advance. Does any of this ring a bell?
Vaguely, yeah.
We have the same scenario here at the Olympics with Ukraine once again involved in Group B. Argentina, Ukraine, Morocco, and Iraq are all on 3 points. Tomorrow, Ukraine and Argentina meet in Lyon. Morocco and Iraq meet in Nice. And this is relevant because we both think the U.S. is going to advance now from Group A. They would meet a Group B team in the quarterfinals. So U.S. fans need to be watching those two games to see who their next opponent would be.
Do we know what the criteria is if it all ends up again with 4 for the Olympics? Do they do something different?
It's goal difference. What complicated the Euros a bit was that head-to-head was the first tiebreaker. Here it is goal difference.
It is goal difference. All right. Well, we'll see ultimately who comes out of that. I mean, just as long as the U.S. wins and it goes through, we'll deal with whoever it ultimately is.
Even if it's Argentina?
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Especially if it's Argentina, Mosse. Bring it on. Bring it on. Maybe our Olympic team can provide us something this summer when it comes to a U.S. men's national team doing something big and bold.
As we've talked about, the men's Olympic soccer tournament has 16 teams. The women only has 12. And the IOC was asked about that recently, gave an interesting response. He said that if they increase the women's tournament to 16, that would open the floodgates, and other sports that have fewer teams right now would ask for their numbers to be increased, and there's a cost issue there. Bit of a weird answer. What did you make of it?
I kind of like the fact that it was honest, from the IOC. Because many of these big entities, usually it's, kind of gobbledygook and nobody really says anything. And it's, well, we're looking into it and blah, 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 blah. No, they really came down and said, this is the reality of what will happen. And it's different than FIFA, obviously, because when it comes to FIFA, it's all soccer. And you were just talking about these, the tournaments. And so the equity of teams and all that kind of stuff, it's a little bit more clear cut. And I will say probably a little more easy because of the revenue potential and reality over the years when it comes to soccer. And so the IOC saying that's fine, but there is a immediate kick-on effect to when you say, all right, we're going to do this with the women. And so I get it. It's not an excuse that people are necessarily going to accept. But if you're just looking at it practically and from a pragmatic standpoint and a business standpoint, I understand. I would much rather have 16 teams when it comes to the women's team at the very least, even specifically for how easy it makes it when 2 teams come out and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how that changes other than the IOC makes so much money that they actually are able to accommodate all of these other sports. And while we talk about soccer here, and at times we talk about the realities of the revenue that it generates. You want some stark reality? Then go talk to some of these athletes that perform in sports that get very little, if any, money, and are just dying for any type of attention and any type of resources and funding out there. So, and are certainly not going to make it up in terms of the sponsorship, in terms of the people that are coming to it, the tickets, all that kind of stuff. So, I appreciate the honesty from the IOC. I don't know what the answer ultimately is.
I just conceptually hate the third-place team in a 4-team group ever advancing in a tournament. I think it needs to be 16 or 32, but I get what you're saying as well.
All right. Anything else, my friend?
That's it.
All right, we've done a lot of Olympic talk, but there's all sorts of other stuff that's going on in the soccer world. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, some MLS All-Stars, some Leagues Cup, some transfer news. Don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back. Interesting stuff happening over there when it comes to MLS. We were in the All-Star break, and now we've moved into the Leagues Cup time here. Go back to the All-Star game. It was, as we mentioned, interesting in terms of the event and having been around now for almost 30 years. Again, I talked earlier in the show about the way the Olympics and the production of the opening ceremonies and the Olympics in general have increased and progressed and grown. Same thing when it comes to MLS's All-Star game. They've settled, for the last few years on an MLS All-Stars versus Liga MX type of situation here. I do think that's good with the connections that we have. Again, this happened. Ultimately, Liga MX kicked the crap out of the MLS All-Stars. They win 4-1. So a Liga MX All-Star team beat the MLS All-Star team.
Yeah, this game was in Columbus. Cucho scored for MLS in front of his home fans, but Bertarami Idrissi Brunetta and Meza got the goals for Liga MX. In this eternal battle for bragging rights between the two leagues, how much stock do you put in this? Does this bother you or not? Just an all-star game. Who cares?
It's, it's like the FIFA rankings. When you're really high up, you use it to bolster your case, and when you're not, you say that they're dumb and it doesn't matter. And so it depends who you are. If you're an MLS fan, you say, it doesn't matter. Really, it really doesn't matter going on. And if you're Liga MX, saying, all right, not only did we come into your house, but we kicked your ass too. So I think in the general scheme of things, it's not creating new fans or anything like that. People had a good time. I thought Columbus did a wonderful job in hosting all of the events, whether it was the All-Star Skills Challenge before, and then or the MLS Next Pro game that they had, and then obviously into the MLS All-Star game. And again, showcasing what that stadium has become, but more importantly, what that city has become in terms of how important it has become to Major League Soccer, despite almost going away a few years ago.
It is a bummer, obviously, that Messi was injured because the star of stars was not able to take part in the All-Star game.
All right, so now we head off to Leagues Cup. Again, the second iteration of this tournament that was created last year, went great guns last year, an intra-season tournament that is the de jour type of thing to do now when it comes to sports.
I was going to say, Liga MX fans felt good for a couple of days after this All-Star game, but they're not very happy right now because we mentioned last year MLS clubs dominated this competition, 6 of the 8 quarterfinalists, 3 of the 4 semifinalists, and both finalists, and they have picked up where they left off. We've had 8 MLS versus Liga MX matches in this edition of the Leagues Cup. Liga MX has only won 1. That was a 1-0 Atlas win over Houston. The other 7, 5 regulation MLS victories and 2 shootout wins. Some of the ones that caught my attention: Inter Miami beat Puebla 2-0. Rojas and Suarez with the goals. Inter Miami continuing to thrive without Lionel Messi.
Yeah, so those are some of the interesting things. 50,000 people up there in San Jose for the San Jose. What was it? San Jose Chivas? Is that
that was one of the shootout wins.
Yeah,
that was 1-1, and then San Jose.
But
won
still, San Jose. We talk about this being a home tournament for the MLS teams, but in this situation, because of the fan base of some of these oppositions, sometimes it's an away game, and so congratulations to San Jose. You saw how much it meant, because there's sometimes the question as to, do they actually care or not? And people are screaming and yelling and running on the field, and hugs and kisses and all that kind of stuff. And it was a feel-good moment for, let's be honest, the San Jose Earthquakes team that has not had a lot of feel-good moments. So I thought that was important. Just in general, LAFC kicked the crap out of Tijuana 3-0. And to your point about the Miami score, I think, again, this stresses how Miami is more than just Messi. And the more they can do that, I think, internally for themselves, the better off they are going forward. But also externally, it again shows how well constructed this team is. That, again, without the greatest player potentially in the world not being on the field with them, they can still get results in multiple different competitions.
On the LAFC Tijuana match, 3-0 win, Buanga among the scorers there. Did you see Juan Carlos Osorio, former Mexico boss, now Tijuana coach, headbutting a linesman early in the game?
The whole headbutting thing is just, I used to, back in college, one of my friends, roommates, teammates, he was a headbutter. And I'm sure people listening and watching out there, you have people in your life that's their go-to thing, right? For me, it never was. There was a weird intimacy that that was not something that I was going to do in any type of altercation. But my God, my friend in college, he would go out, and as soon as any type of crap started, that was his thing. And boom. And Juan Carlos Osorio wasn't, obviously full-on headbutting or anything like that, but that he thought that was appropriate or right. And for those that didn't see it, he went right up to the referee and got in the face and all that. And it's not a backwards, lunge into someone's head, but just being in that personal space from a headbutt thing. It never occurred to me. But there's people, like I said, that's what they do. And obviously Juan Carlos Osorio, that's his thing.
Elsewhere, Portland beat Leon 2-1. McGraw with 2 goals, both assisted by Evander. I mentioned our last pod that Andres Guardado had picked up an injury recently. I wasn't sure what his status was. Well, he played in the All-Star game, and he played in this game, so he's fine. He's back. Andres Guardado playing for Leon. New England beat Mazatlan 1-0. Austin beat Pumas 3-2. Austin overcoming the absence of their supporters groups who boycotted this match.
Yes, they were able to still find a way to compete and to get the result. I think later on in the show we'll have a little bit of something when it comes to that. But just in general, and we've heard Commissioner Don Garber talk about the strategic importance of this tournament and what it provides for MLS and the individual teams, and to be honest, what it provides for those partners over there. In terms of Liga MX. And then from a pure competitive standpoint, this is a good way to showcase your talent in these moments. And unlike an all-star game where it's just groups kind of thrown together, these are legitimately your teams, and they are getting legitimate results. Now, they're all coming in the U.S., and I get that, and we need look no further than CONCACAF Champions Cup League, whatever you want to call it, over the years, where it's a completely different story if and when MLS teams are playing against Liga MX teams in Mexico. But who knows? Maybe that happens ultimately in the future. We mentioned Columbus over there, and they ultimately finished out on a high note when it comes to their friendlies, right? Is that what happened?
Correct. They hammered Aston Villa, Kucha with a hat trick. We have this debate every year, these MLS versus European club friendlies. Do we make anything of this? Is this a statement for MLS? When it goes the other way and people think it reflects poorly on MLS, we dismiss it as irrelevant. So you sort of can't have it both ways.
We'll do a little bit more about the, it's not a recent phenomenon. It's just an evergreen type of situation where teams come over and they recognize the opportunity. And when I say opportunity, I mean the financial opportunity and the branding opportunity of coming over here in this market and what it means to American soccer. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the week. But I will say that this obviously validates my assertion that the Columbus Crew, if they were to play in the EPO, would finish in the top, middle to top level when it comes to the season over there. So congratulations to the Columbus Crew. It's always nice to do something like that. And it's a nice little feather, and it's a nice little message to put out there. And again, like I said before, when it goes great, you make sure that everybody knows about it. And when it does not go great, you kind of move on to the next thing.
Now, we mentioned LAFC hammered Tijuana, so they're off to a strong start in Leagues Cup. Also enjoying a very good MLS campaign. They're near the top of the Western Conference. We know they signed Hugo Lloris at the start of the year. They're already adding Olivier Giroud in this window, and this French connection might continue with them because there are reports that they are trying to sign Antoine Griezmann as well. Wow. Griezmann has made it clear for years that he wants to finish his career in MLS, so it's a matter of when, not if. He's 33, but still playing at a very high level with Atletico Madrid, and also played for France this past summer at the Euros. So it's just a matter of whether he's ready to pull the trigger on that move now or wants to wait a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the overtures have been very overt over the years when it comes to Griezmann, and he is kind of infatuated with American culture and basketball and all that kind of stuff. So it should not surprise anyone that this potentially could happen. That it's LAFC, it shouldn't be a surprise in that someone like him would want to go to a big market, and that certainly would be appealing. But, can LAFC fit him in? I mean, I know they can do pretty much anything, and they are purposely flexible when it comes to the rules and regulations. But if they can figure that out over there with John Thorrington and Steve Cherundolo, the rich get richer. And they're going to have to pay, don't get me wrong, but I'm here for it. I'm excited about it from an LA perspective and from an MLS perspective. And I think that he'd be one of those signings that, yes, it's a big name, not the biggest of names, but a big name and a logical type of player who would appreciate and enjoy and would bring something to the league on and off the field.
I know for a fact that a few months ago, there were discussions between Apple execs and MLS officials about Inter Miami aside, the lack of star power in MLS right now. And we've seen, it sounds like Marco Reus is joining the Galaxy. We know Giroud and potentially Griezmann joining LAFC. Chucky Lozano is headed to the expansion San Diego team. So there has been an increase. I don't know if it's because of what Apple said, but nevertheless, it is happening.
And, this is a bigger conversation, but we've had part of this over the years is, if there ever was a moment to go big and go bold, this is it, especially leading up to 2026. And who knows, maybe this is just a logical type of thing that would have happened anyway, or it's a real effort to continue to push that. I think we all want to spend other people's money, and we all want them to spend even more. But if this is the direction that they're going, good, because I only think that it's going to benefit soccer and ultimately going to benefit the individual teams and the league going forward to do big, bold, dare I say, arrogant things right now. And if not now, when?
And then staying with the transfer window, we know Weston McKennie is persona non grata at Juventus, will likely have to leave this summer, while Tanner Tessmann, who helped Venezia get promoted to Serie A and is playing well at the Olympics, is likely poised for a move up. And it turns out the same team is interested in both. Fiorentina reportedly expressing interest in both McKennie and Tessmann.
And this gets back to the Americanness, for lack of a better word, of these teams when they have Americans. And your connection isn't necessarily to the team, it's to the player. And in this case, an American player. And so if McKennie and Tessmann were to go to Fiorentina, immediately I would care about Fiorentina. Much more so than I do now. So that would be interesting. Now, do you think that McKennie is persona non grata because of his demands or because of the soccer player that he is? Because purely from a soccer perspective, and take away the American part, if you just looked at who is worth the money that they are paying, who can play multiple positions, who has been consistent, and who has helped this team, it's got to be a Weston McKennie, right?
Very strange the way that relationship has completely deteriorated. It started happening towards the end of last season. I do think it has to do with him rejecting their contract offers. And then they tried to include him in a deal with Aston Villa this summer, and he refused to go. They were unhappy about that. You obviously have a new coach coming in Thiago Motta, who doesn't seem to rate him, wants to play a different style. So it's all added up to create a pretty toxic situation for him there.
I mean, if he ends up living in Florence.
I was going to say a couple of notes. Florence is where I studied abroad when I was in college, and also the city that Sean Sullivan recently visited on his honeymoon.
Ooh. It's everything that they say and more.
Incredible.
It's a beautiful city, and so they should be so lucky to have our Americans if it ends up being Tessmann also. So good luck with that going forward. So we'll keep an eye on that. Not a lot of crazy transfer stuff going on, but
staying on Florence for a second, I'm going to rattle off a bunch of places. I wonder how many of these Sean Sullivan actually visited, or did they just eat the whole time they were there? Ponte Vecchio, Palazzo Vecchio, Palazzo Pitti, Boboli Garden, Uffizi Gallery, Santa Croce, the Duomo Santa Maria del Fiore. Sean, do any of these ring a bell at all?
Okay, he says
yes.
Yes.
Wow, most of them.
No. You asked him if they ring a bell. Doesn't mean he actually went there, okay? And that you can rattle that off, that's why you're David Mosse. You're amazing. All right, anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi and our One for the Road. Don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concerns. And if you're doing it over there on the social media platforms, keep in mind that our handle is SOTU with Alexi. Use that hashtag AskAlexi. Or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. What do the folks want to know on this show, Mosse?
First up, we have a voicemail. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Alexi, this is Dave Lowe from Greenville, South Carolina, giving you a call about your recent comment on Austin Anthem and their boycotting of the League's Cup. You seem to think it is inevitable, but I would question you and say, shouldn't we fight for what the fans want? Don't we want the Lamar Hunt Cup? And to bring that back, my local team, the Greenville Triumph, are part of the Lamar Cup, but not of League's Cup. I would definitely boycott my team that I grew up with, the Columbus Crew, for not being part of the Lamar Hunt Cup. I find it disappointing and a bit of a money grab. So where do you see us as fans knowing that, yes, this is a business, but also fighting what is good for soccer and what we want for our viewing rights? Thank you guys so much. Love the show. Love you, Dave Mosse. Love you, Lex. I think you have some good things, and sometimes I question your sanity a little bit, but love the show all the same. Thanks. Bye.
I appreciate it, Dave. You're not the only one that questions my sanity at times. So I appreciate you calling in, and I appreciate that you did it in criticizing and in a civil and respectful way. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And Okay, so to your point, and for those that maybe have missed over the last couple of weeks here, we mentioned earlier in the show, Leagues Cup is alive and well and continuing on here. And there are those out there when it comes to MLS fans that look at it as happening, but happening at the expense of the U.S. Open Cup. And we talked about the U.S. Open Cup drama for months now and what's going on, what it is, what it isn't. There are plenty of fans and fan groups that have taken it upon themselves to say, no, this is not something that we agree with. And they are either making their voices heard in the stadium or walking away and not going to games. All right. So first off, you asked Dave, should you do that? Well, first off, you don't need my permission. And I know you weren't asking for it, but hell yeah, have at it. Knock yourself out. Fill your boots. Do whatever you want. If that's what you feel you want to do from a fan perspective, if that's what you, if that's the hill that you want to die on, I get it. Now, you mentioned the business part of it. I think, Dave, that you would understand and would agree that from a pure business perspective, if you are an MLS owner and you are MLS owners and you look at this situation right now, I think you can respect that, the Open Cup doesn't do it for them. Now, I know you come at it from a much more romantic perspective. And if you just looked at it as, this is, I like Slurpees, okay? And if nobody else liked Slurpees or very few people liked Slurpees, I could certainly picket and scream and yell and tell 7-Eleven, you got to have Slurpees, you got to have Slurpees. But if they looked at it from a business perspective and said, you know what, having Slurpees, as romantic as it is, it's been around forever, it's costing us money and it's not helping us in any way, other than for the people that are out there screaming and that redhead that's screaming that Slurpees have to remain. And so from a business perspective, making that choice is something that they want to do. I will say when it comes to pure competition, and I do think that fans want the best competition, fans want their players to be put in the best situations. If you're looking at it purely from a competitive standpoint, I think you're hard pressed to say that the actual opponents that you're playing in Leagues Cup aren't as good as what you face in the Open Cup. And I know that there's a romanticism that's attached to something like an Open Cup in all countries. And I'm not saying that isn't of value. And I'm not saying that's not necessarily worth saving. But at some point, you have to make decisions. And plenty of fans I talk about and scream and yell about the overworking of players, and the amount of games that they have, and they want players that are rested. Okay, fine. Well, this just adds to it. And so what has happened in a very short period of time is MLS has created something that is compelling, and the numbers back it up in terms of what they have gotten, in terms of the fans that they get. I just mentioned 50,000 people the other day up there watching San Jose. And so they've created something that in very short order has leaps and bounds surpassed what the Open Cup is. Again, I know it doesn't fulfill the romanticism of the lower division teams having the opportunity and the Cinderella stories and all that kind of stuff. In a perfect world, I would love to have all of that. But, MLS has to do what they feel is right for their business. And by the way, you as customer, you have to do what you feel is right as a customer. All right. And I know I'm putting this all in business terms, and to you, Dave, and to others, it's much more personal. I get that. All right. But, we're at a situation right now where, are you changing anything? I don't know. Maybe you're just going to be like me out there outside of 7-Eleven saying, I want Slurpees. And they're going to go, you know what? Sorry, we're moving on to a Slurpee-less 7-Eleven. I hope that never happens. But I would probably be out there and I would be like you, romantic about it, and say, hey, this is personal to me. And I would never stop somebody or, I guess make fun of somebody, saying what they believe and backing what they believe and standing up for what they believe in a sense here. So have at it. Go for it. I don't know if it's going to change anything. And I hope you respect and understand where I'm coming from, and certainly when I put myself in the position of the ownership of MLS. And who knows? In a perfect world, like I said, we can have all of these things, and we can have a robust Open Cup that provides you and me and everybody with those romantic moments and gives opportunities for a lower level. But if it's just altruistic, if it's just charity, then I guess that's the ultimate question, is what responsibility does someone like Austin or any team in MLS have for the greater good of the game? You don't want to kill the golden goose, and you don't want to do anything that's going to be detrimental to the very game that provides the lifeblood, but you also have to do what's best for your actual business. And in this case, it's the business of MLS. And that's the balance that's go on. Either way, I appreciate, Dave, you calling into the voicemail.
Next up, we have a question on X. Franciscus Avelinis asks, Alexi, in internationals, do all teams speak or curse in English mostly? This was in response to a picture you posted of you from your playing days in a U.S. match, yelling at somebody, presumably who didn't speak English. So.
Well, okay, so it's a good question, and my little brain thinks that it's obvious, Franciscus, but it might not be. So I do think that when it comes to the languages that are most commonly used, regardless of the nationality of the players on the field, it's English and it's Spanish. I do remember when I first got down to Ecuador to play for Emelec, and I stepped on the field, the first thing that I did was, with this Ecuadorian referee, start screaming and yelling in Spanish. And I very, very quickly found out, although I should have known, it was just a boneheaded move, that my broken Spanish and all of the swear words that I was using did not have the same effect that me in English talking to an American referee did. And I quickly got thrown out of the game. So you have to be careful. But I do think, the first words that you learn are the swear words, and you recognize very, very quickly what the nationality is, especially when you're playing in the international game, what the nationality is of the referee, because oftentimes it's not the nationality of the two teams that are playing. And so your most direct and quick response, and the language that is the most effective. And I think that referees are taught, and rightfully so, to recognize that there are things that are lost in translation, that the intent in one language can be completely different in another language. And you as players have to recognize that when you are talking about it. But I would think that it goes English first, and then Spanish, and then maybe French, I would think, maybe, when it comes to that. But, for example, we were working with Giorgio Chiellini over the last month. And I guarantee that he had his library of words, and him as a captain, that he dealt with referees on a continual basis in English when he was playing either for Italy or when he was playing for Juventus and they were playing internationally, that kind of stuff. And it would be that catalog, and he would speak and try to come to some type of understanding. But it's fun to see, and oftentimes you will see people that you don't associate with a language using that language. For example, we don't see Messi talk in English a lot, all right? I'm not saying he can't, but obviously he doesn't. And yet on the field, I'm sure there's times when he's playing in an MLS game where he has his catalog of English phrases to use, maybe some not so nice and maybe some kind of endearing, that he has now developed playing in an American league like he is. Mosse.
You mentioned Giorgio Chiellini. We also worked with Clarence Seedorf way back in the 2018 World Cup. And I remember Zach Kenworthy telling me a story of he was with Seedorf once, and in a span of 10 minutes, he heard him speak like 5 different languages, different people he was talking to, and phone calls he was getting. So that was
and
impressive.
I think that's much more relative to the coaching situations that a lot of these guys go through. And yes, they go and play in different cultures, and obviously there's different language, but they also, sometimes you'll go to a culture and a league, and you're playing, and the predominant language is X, and then the coach comes in and doesn't speak that, and maybe doesn't speak what you're speaking. And so, yeah, it is amazing sometimes to hear, the catalog of languages that players have. And maybe it's just rudimentary, and maybe it's even more in depth. I mean, Clarence is an incredibly smart guy, great player, but also a really smart guy. And so that he knows multiple languages, I think should come as no surprise. And some of it's out of necessity and out of survival for some of these players in terms of living, because we talk about that 90 minutes, but then you have to live your life in that other 22 and a half hours. And a lot of times it's relative to a language that might be new to you. So you better figure it out. What else? Anything else I want to see?
Time now for One for the Road.
Oh, good setup there. Yeah, we're going to move on to One for the Road. So You can roll our little van jam, if you will. Yeah, you can see us running around there. I got asked a question, Mosse, and it's kind of an evergreen question. And it got me thinking about, the American soccer world in which we live and inhabit, about why the women are able to compete at a high level. When we talk about women, we're talking about the U.S. women relative to the U.S. men, and why the women have been able to compete and for so long at a high level, while the men, yes, they have had their moments over the years, but certainly not to the level even close that the women have. Now, some of this is obvious to folks when it comes to the two very separate pathways of progression that the men's game and the women's game have taken. There's a lot of crossover, and there are a lot of partnerships and similarities, but there is also a lot of difference when it comes to women's soccer. Let's be honest. Women's soccer for 30 years has had a head start and has benefited relative to the rest of the world when it comes to resources. Okay, and you're talking about everything from pure dollars and cents to fields, coaches, equipment, teams, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to legal protections and Title IX, and that is a huge, huge factor because that has led to cultural acceptance and general cultural acceptance of not just women's soccer, but women's sports as part of our society, and in a very, very different way than other cultures. It has led to huge participation numbers and the whole explosion of youth soccer and, the suburban, AYSO type of stuff. All of that kind of stuff has helped. The respect that, let's be honest, just does not exist in other countries and cultures and hasn't for a long time relative, again, not just to American soccer players and American female soccer players, but to American female athletes. And that comes from a lot of things that I just mentioned there. Media, treating women's soccer and treating women's sports from a media perspective at a whole nother level. Now, has it always been at the level of the men's game and men's sports? No. But relative to other women's sports and other women's soccer around the world, light years ahead. And ultimately, professional opportunities, multiple professional leagues. Yes, the whole college infrastructure that for decades has produced incredible players and successful teams and has been an incubator for all of that talent that we talk about. But ultimately, men's soccer in the United States, it hasn't had a lot of those things relative to the rest of the world. And so that head start that we have taken incredible advantage of, and this is not to downplay anything that the U.S. has done. When it comes to the men's game, there are teams out there that have had head starts. There are teams out there that, from a cultural perspective, have used those advantages over the years, not the least of which is your friends Brazil and others out there. And you use the advantages that you have. Obviously, what we have seen, and certainly of late, but it's been a steady type of change, but it has accelerated dramatically over the last, let's say, 5-10 years, is the rest of the world catching up. And in very short order, just putting even limited resources, but additional resources, they've been able to make up great strides. This is nothing that we should fear. We should welcome it. It is going to ultimately make our women's soccer and our women's soccer teams better. Competition is good. You mentioned earlier that when we talk about the U.S. women's national team, oftentimes it's with the reality that, they're going to beat 90% of the teams that they play. That's not something that you necessarily want from a competitive standpoint. You want the rest of the world putting money and resources in. You want the rest of the world respecting the sport and respecting women in the sport in the way that we have. And again, this is not to say that we have hit the finish line. We still got a long way to go when it comes to what we do when it comes to women's soccer and when it comes to women's sport. But if you look back, and again, this goes back to sometimes we need a kick in the ourselves for what we haven't done, and sometimes we also need to pat ourselves on the back. It is, like I said, night and day relative to the rest of the world in terms of what we have done, and we have reaped those rewards, and we should be incredibly proud. but we shouldn't. And we mustn't rest on our laurels. And, you know, that failure that happened last summer at the World Cup, and we've failed before at World Cups, women's World Cups. I think a lot of people use that as an opportunity to say, you know what? The rest of the world is coming. That's a good thing. It's going to make us more competitive. If that's the kick in the ass that we needed, fine. You know, we'll pat ourselves on the back for how far we've come in a relatively short period of time. But if we needed a kick in the ass, maybe last summer in New Zealand and Australia was that kick in the ass that we needed. And the rest of the world is coming. The rest of the cultures are starting to catch up. It's going to take them a while. Some of them out there, and some of them are going to go kicking and screaming. But ultimately, women's soccer is going to continue to grow around the world, and it's going to put pressure, and good pressure, on the United States going forward. But that's just the simple reality of the world and the culture, the American culture, that we have all grown up in when it comes to soccer. And again, it's not to say that the incredible women that we have had on the field, the incredible teams that we have put on the field, don't deserve credit. And they'd be the first ones to admit that by the grace of God and where they were born, they were given specific advantages. And it doesn't mean that we haven't fought for them internally, but certainly when you compare and contrast with the rest of the world, there are players, there are teams, there are cultures that would look at what we have done when it comes to women's soccer, what we have done when it comes to women's sport, and say, God, I would love to be able to say that. And who knows, in the future, maybe they will be able to say that they are on par.
I do wonder if the success under Emma Hayes will impact the men's coaching search at all. I know it's apples and oranges in so many respects, but nevertheless, you go out on the women's side, hire a big-name foreign coach, and you have all this success. So, you know, Matt Crocker was already leaning that way anyway. Does this strengthen his conviction that that's the way to go? It's been a bit quiet on that front the last
yeah,
several days.
I was just about to say, we haven't heard a lot. I told you about when I was in Milwaukee, about the number of people, I mean, just the sheer number of people. And that is the first question they ask. What's going on with the men's team? What are we doing with the men's team? Who are we hiring? And, you know, I don't know. I haven't heard anything new. And I think that, you know, the United States Soccer Federation, the powers that be, the Matt Crockers and such, they recognized that they were going to take a hit. And everybody, why are you doing something? Well, you know, do something. And they recognize that it's going to die down. But at some point, you know, we got to do this thing. And I hope, regardless of who it is, man, woman, American, not American, just somebody that I can say, all right, cool, I will follow you, and I'm excited about it.
The only major development last week was you throwing your hat in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, I'm awesome, Mosse, and America should be so lucky as to have me. All right, anything else before we go, my friend?
That is it.
All right, thank you again for downloading and reviewing and subscribing and rating and doing all the different things that you do. More Olympics, whether it's soccer or anything else, they continue on, and they're providing us wonderful things. Our U.S. teams, both of them, the men's and women's, on the verge of continuing on, so keep an eye on that over the next couple of days. We'll talk about that later on this week, and I'm going to go watch a little bit of Olympic breakdancing and see what the hell that's all about, my friend. All right, until later on in the week, my friends, I hope you're doing well out there, whether it's on or off the soccer field. And until later in the week, size the day.